Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, and the B.L. Manger Foundation. This special series of Jewish Insights on Pnimiut HaTorah, the inner wisdom of Torah, in celebration of Shavuot, is brought to you in part by Share.
There's an inner rhythm pulsating beneath the surface. It whispers ancient truths, guiding the curious, the seekers and the dreamers towards something deeper, something timeless, something inside us all. Welcome to Pnimiut, the inner dimension. Welcome to Share. We founded Share to bring the Torah's deepest wisdom to life, providing a home for holistic and inspired living. We know that we need to meet people exactly where they're at every stage of their journey. This is why we partner with established organizations and dynamic entrepreneurs through 5 core channels to share this wisdom. We believe the future of Pnimiut lies in the hands of those who live it, learn it, and teach it. That's why we are dedicated to amplifying the voices of scholars and nurturing and empowering the next generation of leaders. Learning is at the heart of everything we do. Our goal is to equip schools, organizations, and educators alike with the tools they need to share this meaningful content with their students and community. The digital world has democratized education, offering connections in unprecedented ways. From dazzling masterclasses to cinematic productions, from short-form bursts of wisdom to thought-provoking conversations, we are blending high-quality production with compelling storytelling to share Pnimiut teachings across the world. Nothing can replace an authentic encounter with the written word. Our publications aim to unlock the most profound Pnimiut texts for the curious mind. The goal of Pnimiut is to enhance our actual lives. Whether it's connecting deeply at immersive retreats or sparking creativity through our gatherings and summits, each experience leaves a lasting impact. Share's vision is for a world where the teachings of Pnimiut guide every moment of one's life. This is more than a mission, it's a movement. And the moment for this movement is now. As the Zohar says, one day, even children will understand the simplicity of the hidden wisdom that will be revealed to everyone. Welcome to Share. Welcome to the inner dimension.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights, where we are shooting our special 5th and final episode of our series on Pnimiut HaTorah, the inner wisdom of Torah, with our friend Cher from Woodmere, New York, in Long Island at Congregation Aish Kodesh, where we had the amazing merit to be sitting with Rabbi Moshe Weinberger. Rabbi Weinberger is not only the founding rabbi of Aish Kodesh, but he's really a beloved teacher across the Jewish world. Many of my teachers look to him as their teacher. People like Rav Judah Michel, who's been on the show before, Rabbi Shlomo Katz, who's been on the show before. And so to sit with my Rebbe's Rebbe is a very special opportunity for me. It's our first time meeting, and I'm really, really excited about that. He's taught countless classes. I think I counted over 5,000 classes online, articles, books, you name it, it's all out there. And he has spent decades really igniting Jewish souls through bringing Chassidut to the modern Orthodox world and beyond, bringing the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, who hopefully we'll learn about, the Ramchal, the the Piazetzner Rebbe, many others, Rav Kook as well. And so for me to be able to sit with him and learn is very exciting. And what I hope to do today is really explore how those teachings speak to generations of today, what the Torah he's brought to his people has been, and how we can bring it to our audience as well. So with that, Rabbi Weinberger, thank you so much for making the time today. It's really an honor to be in your shul with you.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here with you. Thank you.
Amen. So I just want to first ask, as someone explained it to me, and maybe you'll correct me, kind of, when you really embraced Chassidut, it was not as common a thing in the modern Orthodox world, and now it seems like everyone in the modern Orthodox world is studying Chassidut, except for me. I'm a Musar guy, but I'm trying to learn more Chassidut. Just tell me a little bit about how that started. How did you encounter Chassidut, and how did it become such an important part of your learning in Torah?
So, from a very early time in my life, I would take these trips back to my family's past, and my wife always laughs that there's a famous poem in Chivi about a person who wished he could be back in the past, and she always jokes about how I wish that I could have lived at some point in the past. My parents were from a different world, pre-Holocaust Europe, and I grew up with stories, and to me it was a mythical, magical world of great rabbis, great tzaddikim, righteous and holy people, and hidden tzaddikim. So I began from an early age to read a lot on the subject of Jewish life in Europe, and that led me also through family that I have who are Hasidim. That led me sort of back to the past, and it was very much tied up together with the family history and my wanting to find something that I felt was authentic. Throughout my entire life, I'm trying to connect to authentic Judaism, and I felt an authenticity and a simplicity and a certain sweetness with all of the suffering of the past. I felt very connected to it.
Beautiful. I'll first of all say that I relate. My grandfather, I discovered after he passed, he survived the Holocaust as well, that his family had a connection to Mozhitzer Hasidim, which I knew nothing about, and I sang the Mozhitzer tune at Shabbat afternoon Shalshudas, the third meal every week, and I never knew that there was a connection, and so I've also kind of tried to discover, there's a lot of focus on the death that happened in the Holocaust, and there's not always a focus on what was life before the Holocaust and what was lost and how to reconnect. So tell me a little bit, what did you discover? Like I know it's a big question, but when you encountered, let's call it Chassidut, or inner wisdom of Torah, how would you describe what that is and why it's so special to you?
I think the best way that I could describe it is, let's say imagine there's a great rabbi like the Mozhitzer Rebbe, a world-famous holy person, and he's conducting a tish, meaning that he's having a public gathering with his followers. There could be a few thousand people sitting around and watching every single movement and listening to the songs, especially in Mozhitz, the music, the teachings. And there are three people that you speak to who experience that. Let's call one Ruvain, we'll call the other one Shimon, we'll call the third one Levi. And you ask Ruvain, so how did you feel about the tish? So he said, wow, could you believe there were thousands of people, and the synagogue, the shul was magnificent, and it was something, I'm blown away. Okay, then we speak to Shimon, and Shimon says, he doesn't talk about the lighting, he doesn't talk about the ambiance. He says the singing was inspiring. I just was very moved by the singing, by the music, and the Rebbe's talking, and what he said I found very inspiring. Thank you, Shimon. Now we're going to talk to Levi, and Levi can hardly speak. We say, Levi, are you okay? How did it go? What's your take on what happened today? He says, it's hard for me to talk about it. I just feel that my soul was taken and was returned to me, and something has changed. I can't discuss it, I can't explain it. So there are different ways that one can experience the Torah. That one can experience Yiddishkeit, Judaism. it's going to be Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot, of Shavuot, and there were different experiences that people had standing at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. There were some who walked away, and what they really, really heard were the words, the lessons that were taught at Mount Sinai. That's great. There were others that were really, really impressed with the special effects, because the fire, the lightning, the cloud, there were great special effects at Mount Sinai. But then there were Jews whose souls were taken away. There were those who said, we don't want to hear Moshe. We don't want to hear this from the mouth of Moshe. We want to hear God. There were others who were afraid of listening to God. They wanted it translated, interpreted. They wanted it conveyed, transmitted. Pnimius, the inner light of Torah, is the world of those who were standing at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, and they were not taken by the special effects. They were nice. It wasn't even the thunder, the lightning, all of that, the music, not even the content. It was the presence of God himself. It was that connection to the living God. That's what Pnimius is about. Pnimius is something that those Jews who stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, because we believe we were all there. But those Jews who stood there, and it says in the verse, Hayom hazareinu, kidaber Elokim es ha'adam v'chai. We saw today that God speaks to man, v'chai, and it gives a human being a different life, a different perspective. Pnimius is entering into a world of being alive as a human being, being alive as a Jew, in ways that can't be expressed in words.
Beautiful. Wow. So I have a lot of questions on what you said. I'm trying to decide which direction to go in. Let's talk about. We joked before the interview began that I'm a Musar guy. I'm a little bit rational sometimes, but I'm certainly someone who's striving to experience what you just described. How does one enter into that world? Is it, I don't think we're not monks. We don't go to the top of a mountain and kind of sit by ourselves. What is it, studying Chassidut? Like, how do you enter into the world of Pnimius, and what does that mean?
Okay, it's an excellent question. There are two stages or parts to finding one's entrance into that world. There's the academic aspect, which there are thousands and thousands of Sifrei Chassidus, books of Chassidus, thousands. And we're fortunate to live in a time where many of these are being translated. And even those that are written in the original Hebrew, when I was growing up, we had to study, it was tiny, tiny little writing with many printing errors and 2 columns on a page, and without any commentaries or explanations. It was quite a challenge to study these texts. But we're living in a time where, thank God, there's a huge thirst. Every year in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, there's an event that's called Tzama. It lasts for an entire week in the center of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem, in the Binyanei Huma, and there are thousands upon thousands of people who are coming there to buy Sifrei Chassidus. It's a sale, Sifrei Chassidus, and every year there are hundreds of old but new titles, such as the one that I have right here, where this is a 230-year-old book, but it's been redone with commentaries, with explanations. So the first thing is, it's a very academic and very, very rigid and very, very complicated and deep level of Torah study. And there's a lot to learn. There's a tremendous amount to study. And within that world of the Baal Shem Tov, there were rivers that were flowing out from the founder of Chassidus, who's the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. There are rivers that were flowing out, and there are different schools of thought in that world of Chassidus. And there's so much to study. You can spend your whole life just studying. That's one thing. Then there's the experience of Chassidus. You can't really get the full flavor of Chassidus or Pnimius of Chassidus unless you dive into the culture, into the world. And much of that was destroyed, unfortunately, tragically, in the Holocaust, but miraculously has risen once again and is available to anybody who wants to connect to Chassidus can't just read it from the books. I remember I once heard that there was somebody who wrote a very, very big academic study on one of the great tzaddik, one of the great rabbis, the Holy Vision, Rabbi Yisrael from Rizhin. And he showed this to a chassid, to an actual Hasidic Jew. This fellow was not Hasidic at all. And he showed it to a Hasidic Jew, and this Hasidic fellow was reading through the book, and he said, it's interesting, it's nice. He said, let me ask you something. He said, have you ever actually attended a Hasidic gathering? Have you ever gone, whether in New York or London or Jerusalem, or Bnei Brak, have you ever attended? Have you ever been part of any of these? So this professor said, no. So the Chassid told him, that once upon a time there was somebody who was studying the subject of love. And he spent years, and he wrote his thesis, and he developed into a major work on the subject of love. And then somebody introduced him to his future wife, and he fell in love. And when he looked back at the book, it seems so silly. So you could study Chassidus, you could read the writings of the great masters of Pnimius, of the inner light of Torah. But if you've never been to Tzfas or Jerusalem, if you've never entered into that world of a Shabbos, of what it means a Shabbos among the Hasidim and so on, so you're missing the experience of Mount Sinai. You might get the words. So you read a lot of books and you're educated, so you might be informed, just like the guy knew about the subject of love. He studied love, and he was therefore very, very well versed in the academia of love. But to be in love is not the same thing as studying it. So Chassidus, there's the study of Chassidus, and then there's the falling in love with Chassidus. And that can only take place when you take that dive into that world. A lot of it's connected to studying the stories also of Chassidus. We have a whole literature, not just Rabbi Nachman, whose stories are world famous, have been translated into like 50, 60 languages, where every word has deep Kabbalistic meaning. The stories of the Hasidim capture the soul, the heart. So going back to Mount Sinai, it's almost Shavuos. There are the words that we heard at Mount Sinai, which are engraved in our hearts and in the consciousness of the Jewish people and the entire world, non-Jews as well, the Ten Commandments and so on. But the soul, the experience, having stood at Mount Sinai, which is in our collective memory, that requires the stories, the experiences of being among the Hasidim and hearing what their world is like and being part of that, trying it out.
Beautiful. Again, I have 12 questions. I'll pick one. Let's stick with Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, for a second. From where you're sitting, it's a unique thing that revelation was a communal experience, right? This idea that all the Jews were at Har Sinai. It wasn't one person went into the clouds and came back and said, I have this thing. How do you understand why God chose to reveal himself in that way? Why was that the mechanism? And then you also mentioned this idea of we were all there in some way. So how do we tap into we were all there in some way today as well?
Right. So the first of the Ten Commandments was Anochi Hashem Lokecha. I am Hashem. I am your God. Hashem, your God. It doesn't say Anochi Hashem Elokechem. In Hebrew, that would mean I am the God of all of you. Of all of you. Looking at millions of people, I'm your God. It doesn't say that. It says, I am your God. And according to our sages, each individual Jew that was standing there actually heard that personally in some way, and how it reached him individually, his psyche, his heart. It reached each person individually. So we have these two worlds of the collective of the Jewish nation, the Jewish people, and we have each individual Jew to life and to itself. And therefore we find that there are different aspects of Torah that appeal to different people. So you said you feel a connection to Mussar. That's a beautiful world. The great masters of Musar, Rabbi Salanter and the Alta from Kelman, from Slobodka, they were very, very great and holy people. It means that your soul has a particular connection to that. And that comes from the voice of God that you heard, speaking to you and telling you, this is an aspect of Torah that is going to reach you in a very deep way. Explore it, cultivate it. It's going to reach you. All the other areas of Torah are equally true. So I'm a Chassid, but I respect all the great teachings of Musar as well. And they're all true, but there are different souls, and there are different aspects of Torah that appeal to different souls. Just as I said before, that when standing at Har Sinai, there were some that wanted Moshe to speak, and others that wanted to hear God, to hear directly from God. So they're all different types of souls. We share so much in common, which we need to focus on what we share in common, but at the same time, there are different root souls that need a different part of Torah. There's a friend of mine that his whole adult life, he's going around buying tzitzis to give out to people, the fringes, to give out to people that this is like his thing. He's crazy to do this mitzvah. So something happened at Har Sinai where even though he received the Torah personally, like what we all did, but somehow God whispered into his ear, listen, Moshe, I want you to help people out with tzitzis. They need your help. And he heard that. And that's something that reached him, and it's taken over his life. So each one of us has to find that, to try to somehow detect that whisper of the Torah that is in your ear and my ear. I felt the whisper of the Baal Shem Tov. There are others that they hear something different. We share so much in common, but at the same time, we have to pursue that voice that we hear inside of us. That's the voice of Har Sinai.
Beautiful. Let's stick with the Baal Shem Tov for a minute, because I know that's someone who not only, as you mentioned, you felt that whisper, but you've done an amazing job of bringing generations of people to the Baal Shem Tov now. I know we don't have 10 hours to break down the Baal Shem Tov, but if you could a little bit bring us in, what speaks to you about the Baal Shem Tov, and maybe like a favorite Torah of the Baal Shem Tov or a favorite story of the Baal Shem Tov, something that can help us connect, bring us into the Baal Shem Tov and what you're hearing from the Baal Shem Tov.
That would require much more than 10 hours,
yeah.
And it would require more than 10 centuries. It's like I said before, that when there's something that is taking your breath away, it's taking the words away, it's very hard. So if you would ask me to talk about my mother, she should be well, who's not far from here.
Amen.
A 95-year-old survivor of Auschwitz. I wouldn't know where to start. I wouldn't know how to speak about my mother and to describe to you the feelings and the love that I have. The Baal Shem Tov was a soul that was sent into the world when the Jewish world was falling asleep. That's how the great rabbis described it. The pogroms, the massacres. There were great scholars, but the heart and soul of Judaism was sort of slipping away. And the Baal Shem Tov was sent to a part of the world that's now called Ukraine. And then the Carpathian Mountains. Actually, my parents are from that area. The Carpathian Mountains are very large. My parents were in the Hungary side of it, but the Carpathian Mountains, which is now Ukraine. And the Baal Shem Tov began to speak in a language that was not only for scholars. He began to speak in the language of every man. He began to show that even the tailor, the water carrier, the housewife, even the madman and the lunatic were loved by God. He didn't come to teach anything new in Judaism. The Baal Shem Tov himself once said that when somebody asked him, there was a great scholar that asked him, well, what did you do that's different? And why is it that the whole world is chasing after you? Like, what happened? So the Baal Shem Tov said, I'll explain this to you. I'll tell you how it works. There was a silversmith, a master silversmith, who was famous in the whole land. And he had an apprentice, an understudy that was with him for a while, who was very talented. And finally, it came to a time where there was some wealthy fellow that wanted to have some silver work done. And he asked the master, do you have somebody you could send to work for me? I'd like to have some things made. And he sent his disciple. He said, sure, he's terrific. So this fellow went. And he came back not long after he came back. And his teacher asked him, how did it go? He said, it was terrible. Well, what happened to all that I taught you? He said, I didn't forget anything at all that you taught me, and the fellow was not pleased with my work. So the teacher asked him, did Did you have the right materials? Did we spoke about it? I showed you. And he answered yes to all. The checklist was yes, yes, yes. So then the master said, well, what about the furnace? How did it work with the furnace? So the guy said, I forgot about that. I just didn't put anything in the furnace. So the Baal Shem Tov said, I'm not changing anything in Judaism. Same Shabbos, same Pesach, same Matzah, same Maror, same Sukkah. It's the fire. I came to the world, I was sent to the world to turn on the fire. That's what the Baal Shem Tov was about. Nothing changed, nothing new. But the fire of the Baal Shem Tov was to take, for instance, to take a simple Jew who prayed, who davened every day, but never really thought about the fire of his relationship to God. Just carried out the requirement to pray. We're all obligated to pray 3 times a day, and this fellow was doing it, but without the fire. So the Baal Shem Tov came to wake us up and to say, you don't have to be a scholar to be loved by God. God loves the scholars as well, but you don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be wealthy or a scholar or from the elite class of the Jewish people to experience the joy, the thunder, the lightning, the joy of Judaism. And he walked through the countryside, and he spoke to hundreds and hundreds of communities and thousands of people. And it's almost impossible to understand. There was no internet. There was no social media. How is it that within one generation, by the time of his disciples, the Mezritch Shemagid, the Balatanya, the Seer of Lublin, and so on, all those tzaddikim, those great righteous rabbis, how is it possible that by that time, approximately 2/3 of the Jews of Europe were already taken by the light of the Baal Shem Tov? That they were already drawn into that world of Chassidus? The answer is, the Baal Shem Tov didn't just come to offer teachings, he came to offer life. In general, the way that Jews were raised is that you have a choice between good and evil. Choose the mitzvahs, it's a way of good, and stay away from the bad stuff, that's evil, which is all true. But the Baal Shem Tov said, I agree with all of that. But it also says, regarding Judaisam, uvacharta b'chaim, to choose life. The Baal Shem Tov came to give a big l'chaim. He just made a l'chaim. He came to bring life, fire. He made a l'chaim with the Jewish people. And we fell in love with him. It was nothing new. It's like the difference between a cold soup that has all, one of the great rabbis said this, a cold soup that has all the ingredients as the warm soup. But how could you compare that? How could you compare the two? And the Baal Shem Tov, you want a little story? I'll tell you a little story.
Please.
When the Baal Shem Tov was a little boy, he lived in a tiny village called Okap. Now, Okap, it's hard to find it on the map. It's a tiny little village in Ukraine, Okap. There are those who said it never existed. It did, it's on the map. He was orphaned at a very young age. His father passed away, and a short time later his mother passed away, and he was raised by kind villagers. But even though they were kind, the way it worked then is they didn't have schools. They had rabbis, and families would hire that rabbi, and they would study in the rabbi's house. They didn't have any buildings or anything like that, institutions. Now the wealthier kids had the better teachers and the nicer homes to study in. The Baal Shem Tov was the poorest of the poor. He was living only by the charity of the kind people of Okap. So he ended up being in a horrible house, a terrible hovel, and the rabbi that was his teacher with the other boys, that were the poor boys, they were barefoot, and the rabbi was angry. He was angry, and his wife was like screaming, and the kids were dirty. It was a rough thing. Now the Baal Shem Tov was a very sensitive soul, and he found this unbearable. So one time he actually cut school. The Baal Shem Tov just couldn't take it. He went out to the forest. He had a favorite place in the forest where he would go to pray. He was an orphan. He was lonely. He would go to pray in the forest. And he was there for a while until he fell asleep by a tree in the forest. And he opened his eyes, and there was a beautiful, beautiful Jew that was standing over him, a long white beard, a very beautiful Jew. And the man said to him, Cyrillic. Now, Cyrillic is a nickname for Yisrael. The Baal Shem Tov's name was Yisrael. One of the nicknames for the name Yisrael is Cyrillic. And this person knew his nickname. He said, Cyrillic. And the Baal Shem Tov didn't know him. He said, Cyrillic, take my hand, come with me. And he lifted him up, and the Baal Shem Tov stood up. And the old man started to walk with him back towards school. And the old man said, I want to give you a blessing. And take this blessing with you your entire life. I give you a blessing, you should have eyes to see. Your eyes should be able to see. And the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, amen. And then the old man disappeared, he went away. Then the Baal Shem Tov came to he went back to school, and then he saw, when he looked at his Rebbe, at his rabbi, he saw that he really was a very good person, he was a kind person, but he was broken from poverty, and that his parents were, the rabbi's parents were killed in a pogrom when he was little. And he looked at the wife, and even though the wife was still screaming with his eyes, he now had the eyes to see that she was really kind, but she was embarrassed of how the house looked, and so it caused her to act out. The Baal Shem Tov said that he believed that that person that took him in the forest, that was Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet, and that Elijah the prophet gave him the greatest gift of all, which eyes to see. The Baal Shem Tov had eyes that saw to the very depths of an angry person. Is not really angry. He's a very holy person. You know, he's going through a hard time, whatever it is. The Baal Shem Tov had eyes to see, and he gave us that gift to be able to look at everything in our lives in a different way. With the eyes of Pnimius, to see the inner dimension of reality. That's the gift of Pnimius. That's the gift that the Baal Shem Tov received from Eliyahu HaNavi.
Beautiful. Wow, thank you for sharing that. I want to, I know that he has such a big influence on you, and you mentioned the idea of kind of bringing Pnimius to, let's call it modern orthodoxy, the masses, whatever you want to call it. I want to talk to you a little bit around where we're sitting, the shul, Aish Kodesh. This idea that I think it was 1992 you started, yes? And, I never want to say how is it different from other modern Orthodox shuls, because I don't want to put you in a situation where you're saying something negative about a different shul. I'll ask it in a more positive way, which is...
I wouldn't anyway. So
yeah, I know you wouldn't. I wouldn't, but I've had people say to me, if you're building a shul, you need a great Baal Koreh, you need a great Baal Tefillah, the guy who reads the Torah, the guy who leads davening. You need to put those in place for the shul to thrive. When you were imagining, and also as you've continued over the past 30 plus years, to you, if you're trying to build a shul that reflects some of the vision that you're describing now, you're building a community, what are the features of that? How does someone, someone wants to start a shul in another place and they want to, not copy, but learn from the model you set. What are the ingredients in your mind of how to build a community like this?
It's a great question, First of all, I initiated, but then I gathered some wonderful people to help. Began without making any distinctions between classes of Jews, not modern Orthodox, not ultra-Orthodox, not religious, not irreligious, secular. We didn't make any distinctions. We were going to have a standard, of course, of Orthodox observance, but it was without any distinctions. Everybody's invited. So that's Aleph, that's one. A place where everybody should feel welcomed. We're not allowing talking during davening. We're pretty strict on that. We're very strict about that. So that's, for some people, that was a turn off.
Right. Someone told me that you had people sign a contract.
It's not true.
It's not true. Okay.
No, there's a myth. It's absolutely not true. We had people sign that we will respect the decorum of the shul. Never sign that they can't talk.
Got it. Respect the decorum.
But we're very strict about it.
About not talking in shul.
Now that's a little bit tricky, because going back to what you asked, what was a very important part, and I insisted upon this from the beginning, you mentioned Baal Tefillah, Baal Koreh. Music, song, nagina is a huge, huge part of Chassidus. You come from Majus to Chassidim, so you know that. Mm-hmm. Song, music is a very, very big part of the shul. So from the beginning, I wanted to introduce to the shul a certain type of soulful music that I believe would reach that part inside it that remembers Har Sinai, the music of Mount Sinai, of Har Sinai. And we introduced certain musicians here that were really, I would say, relatively unknown or much lesser known to the broader Jewish populations, Chaim David, Shlomo Katz, my dear friend Rav Shlomo Katz, and his brother Eitan, and others that really were first introduced to American Jews through Aish Kodesh. Because I believe in the power of Nagina, of music, very strongly, together with a certain brand of Torah. Now, teaching Chassidus is a little bit tricky because, as I said before, if you're teaching something and it's your second language, it's not simple to give that over, really, if it's your second language. So, because I myself did not grow up among Hasidim, even though I have relatives who had a big influence on me, I grew up in the modern Orthodox world. Although my parents cannot be classified as modern Orthodox by any stretch of the imagination, they're beyond any classification, how they grew up when they came to America. But I did go to modern Orthodox yeshiva, and my friends, that was the environment I grew up in. So I spent years and years and years studying Hasidus, teaching it, learning it, and then studying with people who were Hasidim and so on, until the point where I felt that I had absorbed as much as I could, absorb not just the words, but the pathos, the light of Hasidus. I'm still working on that. Now, when people are introduced to that for the first time, it's a very powerful experience, together with the music. So we would have Farbrengens, we would have get-togethers. I made sure from the beginning that we'd have get-togethers on Friday nights, on different holidays, not just the davening in shul. We'd come together with singing, and I would talk and then sing and talk and sing. We would together. And the problem, however, is that a lot of the fellows are facing is that while they're interested in Hasidus, some of the rabbis, some of the teachers, they're interested, and they began studying pretty late. They began studying it, so then it could very easily just fall into something which is just academic, which goes back to all that I've been talking about. So it's an interesting topic. We're going to now, this Shavuot, we're going to have a rabbi come and lecture us on the giving of the Torah in light of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. So again, it's the encyclopedia of love, It's the encyclopedia of Hasidus, but it's not the oxygen of Hasidus. So this is a challenge. So what I've been trying to do together with others is to sort of cultivate some very, very talented teachers, men and women, who have been studying for many years, who have inhaled that oxygen of the Baal Shem Tov and are prepared to exhale and to give it over. It's not just something you can come and teach, like I'll regalachas on one foot, but I definitely feel that is the way to create shuls, and with God's help, also yeshivas. And by the way, I want to make it very clear that it's not only Hasidus. I'm as I said before, I study Musar as well, and I study the teachings of the Gaon of Vilna Gaon, and his disciples who were great. He was a great Kabbalist, and the Nefesh Chaim, Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner, and others. I study their writings, and it's very much a part of our curriculum here in the shul as well. But I'll, maybe to explain what I want to say now, it'll be a tiny little story also, because Hasidim tell stories. So there was a great Rebbe. This goes back to around the year 1830, 1840. He was Rabbi Yehuda Leib from Ostra in Poland. He's not as well known as many other disciples of the Mizrach Magid. He was a genius, but we don't have any writings from him. And there's a story that he would spend a great deal of time teaching every Shabbos and every holiday. And he had one of the Hasidim, one of his followers, had a photographic memory, and would listen to the teachings on Shabbos. And then after Shabbos, you're not allowed to write on Sabbath, on Shabbos. After Shabbos, he would write down word for word, what the rabbi said on Shabbos. Years had passed, and this was very excited. He already had hundreds and hundreds of pages of teachings, which he wanted to have published, but he would never do that without the approval of the Rebbe. So finally, with great trepidation, he went to the Rebbe with this massive manuscript to show the Rebbe. The Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Leib. And Rabbi Yehuda Leib looked at this, and he was going through it very quickly. And the poor fellow saw that the Rebbe didn't look like he was thrilled. The Rebbe did not look like he was pleased. So the Chassid said, Rebbe, did I make mistakes? Is it wrong? But she couldn't understand because he wrote down word for word. So the Rebbe said, no, it's not wrong. Every word is exactly what I said. So can we move ahead? He said, no. So why not? So the Rebbe asked him, tell me something. Did you ever see a lumberjack cutting down a tree? He said, of course. That's how they lived. And the Rebbe said, tell me, did you ever see a painting of a lumberjack cutting down a tree? He said, yes. The Rebbe asked him, what's the difference? Well, he said, it's a painting. The Rebbe said, listen to me. The painting is oi. What's oi? When a lumberjack picks up the axe and he has to give that knack to the tree, he goes, oi. Then he gives a knack. He said, you have all the right words, but it's missing the oi. I gave Judaism, I gave Yiddishkeit, I gave Chassidus with an oi, with a krechts, with my soul. And that's not contained here. I don't feel it over here in these words. So it's tricky. How do you give over the oi of Chassidus? Not just the words.
Right.
That's where it gets complicated.
Right.
And in these past few years, you go to yeshivas everywhere and you see that they're studying Hasidic writings. It's amazing what's going on. All different yeshivas, kids from different backgrounds and so on. And we're davening, we're praying, and we're hoping that there'll be more and more and more teachers coming up through the ranks that also are able to give the oi of Hasidus, not just the words.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I want to ask you a little bit about how we navigate, let's call it trauma, for lack of a better term, on a national level, right? So we've had, I know that you're the child of survivors and I know that you are very close to the writings of the Piazetzner Rebbe, who wrote during that time, and that you named your synagogue after him. We were obviously on the heels still very much of October 7th. We're sitting here today, a day after, someone who works at the Israeli embassy and his fiance were murdered in cold blood. How do you think through these moments of pain for the Jewish people? And I don't know, how do you make sense? I don't know, how do you make sense of them, I guess is the question I'm asking. What do you think about them? I
never made sense of the Holocaust. And anybody who claims to have made sense of it, I'm not interested in what that person has to say. And I have not made sense of what happened October 7th. But I've been talking about October 7th almost every single Shabbos and every single Yontif, every single day here in the shul. The people know I've been talking about it continuously. Not making sense. I don't know how to make sense. And even when Mashiach comes, when Messiah will come, I don't know if we'll be able to understand. I don't know if we'll be able to understand. We'll be comforted, we'll be consoled, but I don't know if we'll be able to make sense of it. But I'll tell you what I've been trying to do. And it ties together all that we've been talking about. And this is a non-Hasidic great rabbi who was called the Chazon Ish. And one of my students shared this with me, that he heard this story of the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish was a huge, towering scholar of probably one of the greatest of the 20th century. He lived in Bnei Brak. After he came ready before the war or after the war. I don't remember exactly when he moved to Israel. He lived in Eretz Yisrael. And towards the end of his life in particular, he was spending most of his day helping people who were going through difficulties. Had all kinds of suffering and tragedies, and many survivors would come to him. He himself did not go through the suffering of the war, but he would help a lot of people. And they came to him for advice and for what we call chizuk, strengthening and so on. And there was one particularly brutal day where all day long he's with horrible stories. And it was the end of the day, it was very late at night. And the last couple had been there sharing something terrible with the children, I don't know what it was. And the attendant, the gabbai, the rabbi's, the Chazon Ish's attendant locked the door for the night, finished. And then the Chazon Ish took his Gemara, he took his Talmud, which he hadn't opened all day. He was busy with people and their tzaras and their problems. And he opened up his Talmud and he started to study, like with excitement and with youthful joy. So the fellow, his attendant, was looking at this and was a little bit surprised. And he had this thought that, how is it possible, after hearing this last story of October 7th, how is it possible that he just it seems like it didn't touch him at all. Like he's just going back to his Gemara. He's just back to his regular schedule. Like nothing happened. And the Chazon Ish picked up on this. He picked up on this, and he closed his Gemara for a second. He said to this fellow, whatever his name is, Yankel, listen, Yankel, I want you to know that every story that I heard today reached a very deep place inside of me and broke me into 1,000 pieces. And only God knows the truth of that. But I want you to also know that there's a deeper part still inside of me, and that's where I'm going to right now. One of the great things, your Hebrew name is Yosef Shmuel, Rabbi Yosef Shmuel. One of the things about Pnimius is that it opens up that deeper part inside. I can't make sense out of what happened. And it's very, very hard to even give words of comfort. I've tried. I've spoken to many of the survivors and families and ex-hostages I've been involved in. And I try and ask God to give words that will give some strength. But at the end of the day, if that person, the survivor, doesn't find something deeper yet to give him life, he could drown in the senselessness and the misery, the darkness. See, my parents, my father left the world a few years ago, my mother, she should be well. My parents went through all of that, Auschwitz and Mauthausen, they lost their families and so on. How did they survive? I'm not talking about how they survived the Germans. How did they continue on afterwards when they came here to America? And I grew up in a home that I felt was happy. Of course, there was always that cloud, but I was raised my sister and I were raised in a home that was happy. My parents set out on a mission. And that mission was that there's something deeper yet than Mauthausen and Auschwitz. There's something deeper to continue the chain, to revive what happened at Mount Sinai, to bring it to our children and our grandchildren, and to do our best to teach them of what once was and what must be. Those who found something deeper inside of themselves were able to continue on. They had something to live for. Those who were unable to find something deeper, they were very, very lost. So one of the amazing fringe benefits of studying the deeper aspect of Torah is that it opens you up to something still deeper. And in that place, no matter what it is that's going on in your life, you could find comfort, you could find strength. It's where you hear God speaking to you in a more direct way than through the outer layers of Torah. And when a person feels that connection, he has a relationship with Hashem. When you have a relationship with God, even though I don't know why you did this to us, I don't know why this happened to us, but I'm still in it. I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to stay with you. So you could feel that the same God who gave you a smack on the back, but he's hugging you with two arms. And that's a way to survive October 7th. So I think that all of this is connected through experiencing God, Hashem, and Yiddishkeit. Again, it doesn't have to be Chassidus, but in a deeper way, in a deeper way, in a soulful way, then a person is able to open up the Gemara after hearing all the hard, bad news, the difficult news about what happened to yesterday's Jews that were killed. That's the only way that I know of.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask hopefully two more questions we have time for. Let's see. The first is just to talk a little bit about Eretz Yisrael. I know that's a passionate area that you speak about often. You know, what is the spiritual role of Eretz Yisrael in the life of a Jew today? And Eretz Yisrael is the land of Israel.
The land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. I spent some years when I was a kid. My father decided we were going to move there. We moved there for a few years, and for some technical reasons we had to come back. But I was privileged to spend quite a few years there, and then later on to return there. And we were married. We went back there. Again, a Chassidic story to help. It's the easiest way to explain. There was a great rabbi, Rabbi Avram Dov of Avrich. He's called the Bas Ayin because he wrote a very famous book called the Bas Ayin. And he lived in Ukraine, in Avrich. And there was a collector, somebody who was collecting money to help support the community in Israel, which is very poor. Again, we're talking about over 200 years ago. And this collector came to this village and he met the great rabbi, the Bas Ayin. And they were talking about Eretz Yisrael. The rabbi was very anxious to hear. You know, those years people didn't travel. And he was so excited to hear about Eretz Yisrael. And he told him some things about it, the fellow. And he gave him also a blessing that you should be able to move, to come, and you should be able to see the beauty of the land. Anyway, some years later, that Rebbe did move. And he recalled that the last thing that the fellow had told him was that the streets of Israel are paved with gold and silver and diamonds and rubies. So the Rebbe moved to Israel, and he didn't find diamonds and rubies or gold and silver. He found a lot of angry Arabs and other challenges, poverty, disease. And it happened once that this collector who he had met in Europe, this collector who lived in Israel, they met. This collector came to daven, mincha, came in the afternoon to daven. And the Rabbi hugged him, they hugged each other. And the fellow asked him, Rabbi, you see the gold, you see the silver and the diamonds? And the Rabbi said, no, I don't see it. So the collector gave him a blessing, like the Baal Shem Tov story. He gave him a blessing. I give you a blessing, you should be worthy. And we're taught that Rebbe fasted throughout the entire year, of course not on holidays and Shabbos. He fasted a lot, and he cried his heart out and said Tehillim Psalms over and over and over and over again. And it was around 2 years later where he went to find that collector, and he said to the collector, today I saw the streets are paved with gold and silver. I see diamonds, I see rubies everywhere I turn. Again, it's the same thing. Yes, Shmuel. How do you see Eretz Yisrael? If you look at it if you see the land of Israel as a political entity, if you look at it as a political entity, then it's been struggling for a long time. And there's a lot of fighting going on. I'm not talking just about our enemies who are trying to kill us, to destroy us. I'm talking about amongst ourselves. There's a lot of fighting going on. And we don't have peace in the land. This week's parasha we read V'nasati Sholom Ba'aretz. Peace, and the Ramban Nachmanides says, peace first means between Jews. So if you're looking at the land externally, then it's a divided place. It's filled with inside fighting, outside fighting. It's better than it used to be, but there's still lots of poverty and so on. If you look at the land with the eyes of the Baal Shem Tov, with that charity collector, and you're able to see the gold and the silver, the streets are lined with gold and silver. When I moved there as a kid, I was miserable. My father picked me up. I was a big Yankee fan. I was a good ball player. The next thing I know, I'm in some kind of a school with crazy Israelis who are playing soccer all day. I never played soccer in my life. The second time I tried playing, I broke my ankle. I was miserable. I just wanted to be back in Yankee Stadium. I wanted to be back with my friends. I didn't see any gold or silver. My father was like, I didn't see anything. But when I was older, I moved back. My wife and I, after we were married, moved back, and I started to see the gold and silver. I even see it in the angry Israelis. Even in the most angry ones, you get some cab driver who starts telling his whole philosophy of life, and he's screaming and yelling. And I even had one that said he's going to drive. He didn't want me to finish the ride with him because I disagreed with him. He was going to take my suitcase. I was coming from the airport. He was going to throw it onto the road. I had this argument with the guy, but I began to see him in a different way. I started to see him in a different way. And of course, the way that the ride ended was, you should be healthy, Tia Bari, and Achi, my brother. So there are two ways of looking at Eretz Yisrael. You can look at Israel as just a struggling, relatively young political entity with a lot of angry people who were raised with missiles flying over their heads tough and hard. Politicians are crazy. But if you have the eyes and you daven hard and you really work at it, then you see Eretz Yisrael is flowing with milk and honey. Flowing with milk and honey. And there's a big difference between the milk and honey. Milk is something that you need to survive. The baby gets milk. Honey is something that's just sweet and delicious. Where else do you have such a place that's flowing with milk and honey? That I understand that this is the place of Jewish survival, and at the same time, with all of the difficulties, it is the sweetest place in the world. That's what Eretz Yisrael is.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, I want to turn to Megillat Ruth. That's okay.
Great.
That's we have the custom to read it on Shavuot.
Yeah.
And I just want to ask you. I think there's lots of interpretations, but when I mention Ruth to you, what's a Torah or something that you want to share around Megillat Ruth that can bring people into the Pnimius?
Megillat Ruth. To see Judaism with the eyes of somebody who came from outside. Ruth wasn't one of ours. She not only was not one of ours, she came from a ruthless enemy of ours. That's the nation she came from Moab. But to be able to see who we are and to appreciate who we are with fresh eyes. Moses asked his father-in-law Yisro, who also was not Jewish. He said, stay with us in the desert. You should be our eyes, which literally means you should be our tour guide, because he knew the desert, Yisro. But we need to see things with fresh eyes. Ruth is a fresh way of looking at things. She came from the outside, and through that outside, we were reminded of how blessed we are. She told her mother-in-law, wherever you go, where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, your God is my God, and so on. Now, the Rebbe from Berditchev, the Holy Kedushas Levi, one of the great Hasidic masters, explained why do we read the book of Ruth by Shavuos. So there are many explanations for that. On some level, we actually all converted then. We became the Jewish people. So there are many explanations. But the Rebbe from Berditchev said the following. He said, every believing Jew prays all the time to see the coming of Mashiach. We were waiting for Mashiach to come, for Messiah to come. And we say, I believe with full faith that Mashiach will come today, Mashiach. So the Berditchev asked a simple question. How do you daven for something that you've never ever experienced? How do you pray for something? How do you want something if a person could say, I want so badly to have sushi. Now, I never tasted sushi in my life. Not interested. So, can I really crave sushi? It's absurd. I never tasted it. If you tasted sushi, and that was, wow, then you could crave, so you could long for it. So the Berditchev said, how could a Jew long for Mashiach if he hasn't come yet? What does that mean? So he said, because when we were standing at the foot of the mountain by Shavuos, and God opened up the seven firmaments, and we heard the voice of God himself, we experienced what it's going to be like when Mashiach comes. We had a taste of Mashiach. So on Shavuos, we read the book of Ruth, because Ruth ends with the lineage. She was the great-great-grandmother of King David. In effect, she's the great-great-grandmother of Mashiach, who comes from the house of David. So on Shavuos, we're filled with a great longing for Mashiach, to see King David, who comes from Ruth. Because on Shavuos, when we receive the Torah, we tasted the truth. We tasted what it's like, and we want it back. We don't know, but subconsciously, because we tasted it once, at that unbelievable revelation at Mount Sinai, we tasted it, so we want it back. Rabbi Nachman told a story about a fellow that was a very poor guy, and he once got this, somebody gave him, a nice rich guy, gave him a drink of Hungarian wine. Hungarian wine was from Tokaj, was considered the best wine in the world. So this fellow, the rest of his life, this poor guy, whenever he went to other places, they would give him a drink. He would say, it's good, but it's not the Hungarian wine. It's not. I tasted it. Rabbi Nachman said to his followers before he died, he said, I might not have brought you to the place that I wanted you to, but I gave you a taste of Hungarian wine. I gave you a taste, and you're not going to settle. Don't settle. I tell all my Jewish brothers and sisters, taste of the wine of Judaism. Don't settle for anything else, because it's the most delicious thing in the world.
Beautiful. All right, I'll ask you a final question, a short thought if possible, which is you make me excited about the idea of Mashiach by the way you're talking. What's your advice to everyone watching, Jewish, not Jewish, traditional, not traditional? What's a way that each of us can bring us closer to Mashiach? What's our task?
The Lubavitcher Rebbe would say, of blessed memory, I was privileged to see many, many, many times. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would say that do good deeds. Now I'm talking specifically not just to my Orthodox brothers and sisters, but to all my Jewish brothers and sisters and to all non-Jews who are watching this, who are also on some level, all of us are brothers and sisters in humanity in the world that God created. You're all kind, you're all good. The noise of the world in 2025 can cause you to forget how kind and how good you really are. Acts of kindness. Acts of kindness. We're talking about our grandparents. Did you call your grandmother? When was the last time you called your grandmother? Do you know that when you call her, I don't care if you're Jewish or not Jewish, if you're fortunate enough, I never had grandparents. When I was a little kid, before I started going to school, I only saw on television that there was such a thing as a grandparent. I never had grandparents because myself and our little circle of friends, all of our grandparents were killed. You have a grandparent? That grandmother, that booby, that Zadie, that grandmother, that grandfather, when you call up and you say, hey, grandma, how you doing? It's the tiniest little thing for you. She might like to talk for 20 minutes or so. You're giving her life. Do something that's kind. That's a taste of Mashiach. When Mashiach will come, when Messiah will be here, all of the layers of anger, of stress, of being apathetic, of apathy, all of those layers are going to be stripped away from us. And what we're going to be left with is the same way what a rabbi once said, a great rabbi, that when you peel the onion, you're left with a tear. And that tear is the pure essence of who you are. Let's prepare for Mashiach by doing acts of kindness for other people. It's not just about rituals. It's not just about observing rituals and praying. It's about opening your heart up to somebody else, doing something kind for somebody else, that a day shouldn't pass in your life where there wasn't one act of kindness that you did for somebody who needed you. There are a lot of hungry people. There are a lot of hurting people. Do something kind. And that's a taste of Mashiach, and that's preparing for the coming of Mashiach.
Beautiful. And that ties in beautifully to the story of Ruth, which is also kindness. Is a big thing. Rabbi Weinberger, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so moved by just sitting here with you. I hope others have a way to come in, and certainly if they have the opportunity to look you up in your shiurim and your classes online, they should learn as much as they can from you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the time. Thank you.